Women's rights activist Kellie-Jay Keen is live with me. And Braun is facing a furious backlash after using a trans model with visible breast surgery scars to advertise a men's razor. The grooming brand follows in the footsteps of Costa Coffee, which was boycotted for this cartoon ad of a trans man with double mastectomy stars, and Bud Light, which saw Williams wiped off its market value after partnering with Dylan Mulvaney. So, Kelly, what's actually wrong with this Braun ad, in your view? Great to have you, by the way.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me. What's wrong with it? Well, what's right with it, I suppose, would be more of a question. But I spoke to a woman who had a mastectomy 2 weeks ago, and she's still in the grips of a really painful and slow recovery. And she was so offended. She said it just felt really insulting that they are using, especially such catastrophically enormous scars on that woman, that they are using this to virtue signal, when actually having your body parts removed, even when it's life-saving, which it is with breast cancer, is a really serious surgery. They also might be going against advertising standards, which is not to glorify cosmetic surgery. So that's another issue there. But how can we be celebrating this? It's like, is Slim Fast going to suddenly start using anorexic models to show everybody that dieting is such a wonderful thing if you drink a milkshake? It's just preposterous.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. We had Suzanne Evans on our Superstar panel last night. She is a breast cancer survivor, and she was absolutely disgusted by it, actually. So clearly that's something that has resonated with women who have had to have reconstructive surgery. We did contact Braun for comment, by the way, Kelly. They didn't respond, but their parent company, Procter & Gamble, said at PMG, "We aspire to create a company and a world where equality and inclusion are achievable for all." But Kelly, potentially much more serious news with a bombshell new study revealing that 34% of trans kids taking puberty blockers actually suffer from mental health problems. Now, these latest figures are the result of a reanalysis of a study carried out by the controversial Tavistock Gender Clinic in 2011, and they question the original finding that puberty blockers had no impact on mental health. Kelly, this is becoming more disturbing by the day, isn't it?
I'm really shocked that they ever found any evidence that they were anything but harmful, to be quite honest. I think I don't need a study to know that puberty is absolutely essential. That we all know when we went through puberty, we sort of arrived at the end of it completely different people with different perspectives. It is the most significant and the biggest change that you have in any stage of life. So there is more change to your brain chemistry, to your makeup, and to your sort of thinking and cognitive ability in teenage years, more than from infancy to age 3. So learning to walk, talk, recognize, actually become a human being through those toddler years is not as significant as what happens through puberty. And to think that you can mess with it, to play God in any stretch, is just absolutely bonkers. Like, who do we think we are that we can just impose that upon children and it's not going to have catastrophic impacts? And whilst we might be looking at those children in that moment, like through those years, we have no idea. There's no data on actually what totally stopping puberty means for somebody aged 30, like who had no puberty.
And that's why this will be a scandal that unravels over probably the next 3 decades, and we're likely to see mass class action, I believe. But look, we give both sides of the story here on GBNews, Kellie-Jay, and the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust said, "We welcome new contributions to the evidence base around how to support young people with gender incongruence." And the NHS said it's not known whether hormone blockers affect the development of the teenage brain or children's bone. Now, big political story today, Kelly. The Scottish Government has been in court trying to overturn the Westminster veto of its gender self-ID law, which would have made it easier for Scots to change gender legally. Despite all the controversy surrounding the bill, former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon stood by it in an interview recently. Watch.
Do you now have any regrets about the way you handled the gender recognition reform bill?
I don't have regrets about the way I handled it. Women's rights matter to me more than most other things that we could talk about here. But I also think that what is probably the most stigmatised, vulnerable, discriminated against group in society deserves a better crack at the whip in terms of just being themselves. I don't think these things are irreconcilable.
So, Kelly, why is the SNP continuing to lobby for this bill?
Well, I wonder if they're just trying to convince the English to go for independence, to be quite honest.
England campaigns for independence from Scotland. English separatism. Come on. We don't want that. We don't want that.
I don't want it either. But how can she honestly say that women's rights are important and yet... it took her having a bit of a kicking before she realised that you shouldn't put a violent rapist into a women's prison. So I don't really believe her. I think there's other things going on. I think this is a bit of an authoritarian push. I don't genuinely think that Nicola Sturgeon thinks that women can have penises and that it's a good idea for somebody just to identify and fill in a couple of forms and then be legally recognised as a woman. I just don't buy it. I don't think anybody in her position, who clearly is an intelligent woman, I just don't believe a word she said in that little clip there. So as for Scotland going for self-ID, there's no upside to it, is there, for women or children? And they're trying to reduce it to sort of age 16. So I wonder if it's a broader idea about sort of authoritarianism and controlling of a population, because I just don't buy that it's for the good of, as she calls them, a vulnerable population. I also don't think that's true. I don't think the most vulnerable people in this country are people wishing to be the opposite sex. I think there's children living in poverty and elderly people in a very isolated, impoverished existence that are much more vulnerable.
Kellie-Jay Keen, always great to have you. Thank you so much. We'll speak really soon.